25 years ago, a week or two before Mother's Day, I began what would be a 2-year art installation project called Because I'm Your Mother, Textile Portraits of Messages from Mom. The life-size panels showcased my mom's hats, gloves, aprons, scarves, and jewelry. Each lady was my interpretation of the way my mother looked, combined with the words she spoke as I was reaching adolescence in the 1950s. I was in my mid-40s, and it was time for me to reframe the many messages that I interpreted as restrictive, punitive, or fear-based that still took up real estate in my mind. For the next 2 years, I reflected, sewed, stitched, laughed, and cried my way to a place of healing around my long-term, tumultuous relationship with my mom. I created the ladies as pieces of art and as tools for personal healing around the massive impact of mother stuff. During the interactive installation, women and men were able to walk up to a beautiful embroidered 3D textile portrait. As they got close to the panel, they were presented with the phrases that I remembered my mom saying. For most viewers, each phrase triggered an emotional recognition and a new awareness of the mother phrases they carried with them since their early years. The last portrait in the exhibit carried an empowering reframe of an old negative message, the goal being to empower the viewer to identify and then adjust any negative generational messages they may be carrying. This idea of reframing old messages from Mom was not only the underbelly of the installation, but it became the healing tool when used in multiple workshops over the next 5 years. The work helped individuals reframe the messages that they wanted to change, release, or hold on to as a loving memory. This month I'll be sharing snapshots of the panels in memory of my mother, who was my first teacher and the most profound influence in my life. The healing that occurred for me can happen for anyone. I look forward to having you share messages that you heard so we may laugh, sigh, and honor the power not only of mothers, but of the words they use. Because I'm Your Mother. This is the first panel viewers saw. The bra and girdle were the only clothing pieces that did not belong to my mom. I found them in a thrift store and knew immediately that they would make a great signature piece for the installation. The description next to the panel read, "Even though my mother was petite, she looked pretty big, like a giant to me. At a young age, I had a strong personality and would constantly ask the question, why, over and over again, until I got an answer that made sense to me. I honestly don't know how mothers cope with so many questions. Eventually, I grew to understand the words, because I'm your mother, to be a bridge my mother crossed as she connected to a deep and powerful force within her soul. As I grew taller and my mother and I looked eye to eye, she did not seem so large anymore. Her size and my perspective shifted as the years passed. But these words, because I'm your mother, held their own power throughout our relationship." Participants of the exhibit added these phrases to the list. "I know what's best for you." "Do as I say." "Don't make me say it again." "I brought you into this world. Don't make me take you out." What messages do you remember hearing from your mother to get you to listen to her? I'd love to read them in the comments section. You don't buy the cow if you get the milk free. Women have been saying you don't buy the cow if you get the milk free to their young prepubescent daughters for decades. I can't remember when or why my mother said it to me, but it was said, and it was as if the key facts of life all were encompassed in this one phrase. If we were going to be successful in this world, you needed to know you don't buy the cow if you get the milk free. But I did not know. That is, until I was in junior high. A bunch of my girlfriends were at a sleepover pajama party when we started whispering about sex. Sex. Most of us were dumbfounded when someone spoke up, and she said she knew exactly what that phrase meant. She deconstructed the imagery for us. A person contemplating buying the cow was a man, and that the milk was sexual favors, and yep, you guessed it, the cow was any woman. Well, it wasn't hard to figure out that buying meant marriage. We were shocked to discover it was a coded message about how to get married, how the cow could manipulate the sex-thirsty man, making him buy her so he would then be able to get free milk, apparently upon demand. I don't think any of us thought about how much milk the groom had already given away. It never made sense how so many women were comfortable as mothers comparing themselves and their daughters to a cow. Have something to eat. You'll feel better. It may not be easy to see from the snapshot, but this panel has the message, have something to eat, you will feel better, embroidered on a hot roll bun cover with scalloped edges. It's wrapped around a block of styrofoam designed to look like a loaf of bread. I can't point to the exact moment I became dangerously in love with bread, cookies, and cake, but I have a pretty good idea it was before I could walk. I'm quite certain it was before I could talk. Offering food to soothe was a quick way to distract and a very common child-rearing strategy. A cookie or two, or especially 3, got me quiet quickly. After all, it's pretty difficult to scream or have a tantrum while chewing. Everything got better for everyone once the cookie, the sugar load, and I were united. Because I was burning calories at an amazing rate in my teenage years, cookies, ice cream, and potatoes were still the quickest way to calm myself in times of stress, and were effective ways to stop the feeling of overwhelm. There's no doubt in my mind that my first and long-lasting love affair was in the threesome: bread, sugar, and me. The idea of eating my way through stressful situations worked well, and it appeared there were no negative side effects. But the blissful state that came as a result of having something to eat to feel better did not last forever. In my early 20s, I spent decade upon decade riding the roller coaster that came along with diets, restrictive eating strategies, quick weight loss fads, even health spas, all to little avail. It has taken me decades again to work several 12-step programs to disengage my autopilot to eat my stress away. It took me a long while to get honest and admit that the message, have something to eat, you'll feel better, was something I was holding on to way too long. It was not intended as a way of life or as a way of coping through life, especially once I was out of my high chair. Don't tell anyone you started your period, you're too young. During the summer between 4th and 5th grade, I started menstruating. I was only 10. I had 2 older sisters, and yet I had no knowledge of what to expect. When I started to bleed, I thought I had some terrible wound in my stomach, a deadly condition. All this blood, all of a sudden. How could the youngest and 3rd daughter not know what menses was? No one warned me. We didn't talk about it. But there it was, the deep red proof that while my mom and others thought I was too young, my body had a different opinion. After all, starting my menses was not something I could undo. In the middle of the summer that first year, when I was, quote, on my period, unquote, as we referred to it, I was going to be on a sleepover with my cousins. As I was packing my menstrual pads into my small overnight bag, my mom said those words. Now remember, don't tell anyone you started your period. You are too young. It wasn't like I was going to tell anybody, but it was something that was actually pretty hard to hide, especially since I was spending the night. In those days, the pads I needed were huge, and it was impossible to imagine how they could be discarded after use, and it could still be a secret. It was the beginning of an association around shame and womanhood that was subtle but had a lasting effect. For decades, there was a constant effort 1 week out of each month to be unseen, as if having one's menses was something evil, something precocious, something slutty. I eventually learned to celebrate the event, and instead of referring to menses as the common curse, I would laughingly tell myself, well, here it is, time to go with the flow. Are you trying to make yourself as unattractive as possible? My mom never understood my fashion choices. She was sure that she knew what attractive was, and we never saw eye to eye on that. She actually believed I tried to make myself as unattractive as possible. I loved to wear long, loose-fitting pants, large shirts that I never tucked in, and I didn't like to pull my hair back away from my face. I liked the look of the wild. I earned the nickname Rebel because my autopilot response to anyone telling me to change my fashion sense was to either ignore them or come back from my bedroom adjusting my wardrobe so that I looked even less like a lady. Fashion was not in my DNA, I guess. My mom was always well dressed, and most of the time she wore a hat that embellished her outfit perfectly when she went out, even when shopping. I mean, she looked stylish even when she was at home. The aprons she wore always matched what she was wearing when she was cooking dinner or even breakfast. She was an example of perfect harmony in whatever she chose to wear. Some people pay close attention to what they wear. Not me. I guess I never really cared. I took after my dad in that area. There was a casual, almost dock worker look about the way he dressed. I liked that. So I mastered the look of studied casual. I was polite and never told my mom what I thought of her choices around her hair and clothes. Of course, she never asked. My mom's closet was filled with hats, gloves, and aprons beyond count. Every piece that I used in the exhibit, with the exception of the first piece and the last panel, were actually aprons, hats, and gloves that were in my mom's closet. Late in life, as we sat together looking at pictures of the exhibit, she said, "They look really nice, honey, but they could have been made to look a little bit more attractive." And she was right. I love you, Mom. Barefoot and pregnant is not the problem. It's the kitchen part that gets me. The installation's final portrait was created to provide the big aha moment I hoped everyone would see. It was a reframe of one of the things I heard my mom say as a sort of declaration of the limited scope of womanhood. The phrase, "the only good woman is barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen," was one that made even the meekest of us want to rip off our bras and strike matches. My revision of the phrase helped me take my power back. I adjusted this long-standing phrase so that it was appropriate for me as a woman. The description next to this panel read, "I love to be barefoot, and while not all women choose to or can become pregnant with children, we can choose to be pregnant and fertile with careers, ideas, solutions, and actions. So being pregnant does not seem restrictive to me. Not so with the kitchen. The kitchen is like purgatory, a place where there seems to be no end, a revolving door with no exit, another dirty dish, and another bag of groceries." This reframe, "barefoot and pregnant is not the problem, it's the kitchen part that gets me," speaks to the woman I have become, and that makes me smile. This is the end of Mother's Day week. I'd like to read this letter to my mom that I wrote and posted at the exhibit. It was about my journey to reframe and release any messages I was holding on to that were no longer serving me, and my mother understood that. I was able to share the process and pictures of the panels with her. We laughed and cried as she remembered either saying those words or recognized each apron and the hats and even the gloves within each panel. This is the letter I read to her. Mom, I've created these panels as a celebration of the journey I traveled with you. As an infant, I shared the rhythm and heartbeat of you, my mother. I experienced your heart as my heart, as I shared the same rhythm of your heartbeat, and you walked with me inside. You were the energy source at the end of my umbilical cord. When that cord was cut, I continued to look to you for guidance, for comfort and safety. We did not have an easy road. Maybe because we were both so strong-willed, maybe because I saw the world so drastically different than you did. I was opinionated and privileged and determined to do my life my way. I looked to you to love me and help me become as powerful, as wonderful, and as creative as possible. I didn't always understand that that's exactly what you were doing. Now, as I look back, our struggle and the obstacles we created for one another enabled me to be more creative and ultimately more powerful. I am the woman I am today in large part because of the combination of all of the messages, all of the judgment, all of the conflicts, and the rare but precious moments when we were both able to really connect. Thanks for the memories, the words, the messages, and the lessons. As you would say to me, I say back to you. Our journey was as hard as it was because it was a journey with love. Your daughter forever, Noerena.